Hello? Hello and good morning. Welcome to this webinar on the reduction of the error rate in Horizon 2020 cost reporting. We will start the webinar with two presentations. One will be given by my colleague David Mechuto from our legal unit, the other one by my colleague Sorin Sherban from the audit unit. The first presentation will explain to you again the rules governing the cost reporting, in particular on personnel costs. And the second presentation will highlight to you some potential sources of error and how to avoid them. Let me also introduce myself. My name is Peter Hertwig. I am a head of unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation, and I am responsible for a unit dealing with the business processes for implementing Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. We will start, as I said, with presentations, but the session will also be interactive. You may ask questions, not live and orally, but via a system called Slido. I guess most of you are familiar with it. So if you have questions, please go to slido.com, and the code for today in Slido for this webinar is costs 2020, without a space in between, costs 2020. We would invite you to start immediately putting your questions also during the presentations. We would also invite you to look at the questions that others might have already put in, and if you have the same or a very similar question, to just upvote that question rather than sending the same or very similar question again. And we will, at the end, after the two presentations, go through all these questions in the order of number of likes, so that we can start with the most frequently asked questions first. Without further ado, we go now to the first and the second presentation. I should tell you that these presentations are not live. They are recorded versions of other webinars of this sequence of events, but the discussions afterwards, with the help of my two colleagues, will of course be live, and we will reply to your questions live and in full color. See you later.
Well, good morning. We are broadcasting from Brussels, as you have realized. My role today is to speak about the personal costs in Horizon 2020. It is not today's intention to go through every single small little item of the personal cost. That will take us probably more than the triple of the time that Manuel have indicated, but to concentrate really on the main aspects to avoid that you may fall into errors when preparing your cost declarations for Horizon 2020. Actually, this morning I was updating my paper copy, can you imagine? My paper copy of the annotated model grant agreement. If you don't know why it is, don't worry, we will speak more about it in a few minutes. And I have realized that the explanations for the personal cost takes something like about 30 pages in the annotated model grant agreement. You may say that is a lot. But if you compare it with the 300 and nearly 80 pages that the full explanations on the Horizon 2020 grant agreement takes within this annotated model grant agreement, and if you think that probably around 3/4 of the cost and nearly as much of the errors in Horizon 2020 grants are concentrated into the personal cost, probably these 30 pages, even if it take a while to read them through, are not that big and not that much of an effort. But in any case, today, as I was saying, I'm going to concentrate on the typical issues that might raise mistakes when you are preparing your cost declarations concerning personal costs in Horizon 2020. Let's see if we do it right. First indication. Well, if you are today or in a near future connected to this webinar, refreshing your memories of it, it's probably because you have an Horizon 2020 grant agreement ongoing. Well, the Horizon 2020 program, as you can see in the slide, ran it from 2014 until 2020. But it doesn't mean that it's over. That was the time when the program finished. But we still have grant agreements to sign, and for the next year, you will be implementing the grant agreements that you have signed until the end of the program. The message now is that remember that whatever we are going to explain today to you about Horizon 2020 does not apply to Horizon Europe. As Manuel explained it, you already have available some other presentations about Horizon Europe, and very soon we will concentrate on explaining what are the cost conditions, the reporting obligations, etc., for Horizon Europe in a wave of other webinars. Today is Horizon 2020, and also if incidentally you still have alive any FP7 program, the same logic applies. So what I'm going to tell you today about personnel costs does not concern FP7, does not concern Horizon Europe, it's only Horizon 2020. And even within Horizon 2020, I must say that I'm not covering everything of it, because we are going to be focusing these explanations on personnel costs in cost reimbursement grant agreements. So where you have to calculate your actual costs in accordance to the rules of the grant agreement. You may know that we have other types of grants, like the lump sum grants, which is just a fixed amount. So there you don't have to calculate how to declare your costs during the reporting, or like the Maria Sklodowska action grants, where it's a unit cost, it's a fixed amount that becomes already determined in the grant agreement, and you just use that fixed amount. So there are no complications and there are no these financial mistakes. That's the reason why today we are only working concentrated on the personnel costs in cost reimbursement grants. So the first element about personnel costs is, well, who can I declare as personnel costs in my cost declarations for Horizon 2020 grant agreements? Well, I think that the first indent is the most logic. Of course, your employees are your personnel costs. There are no doubts there. Employees, by the way, also means if you are attending this webinar from a public entity, when we say employees, it also means public servants, civil servants, sorry. So these two categories are automatically included in the personnel costs. But you can also declare as your personnel costs seconded staff. For instance, if a professor comes from a different university to work for you, if you are a university into the project, you can also declare the cost of this person as your personnel cost, even if you don't pay directly this person. On top of it, if you are an SME, a small and medium-sized enterprise, and if the SME owner is participating in the project, but is not an employee of the SME, so he or she does not have a salary from the SME, you can also declare the cost of these persons as your personnel cost. And finally, but this is subject to conditions, you might also be able to declare as your personnel cost the cost of other persons that work for you, but that are not your employees. This is the case, for example, of some types of consultants. We will have a few words more on this in the next slides. And this is personnel costs in Horizon 2020. You may think that it's horribly complex. It is, in any case, quite a dense tree of options. That's true. The reason for it is that we have had to adequate the Horizon 2020 grant agreement to the many different options and situations that take place around Europe. So the biggest difficulty when calculating your personnel costs in Horizon 2020 is probably to find your way within this tree of different options. To simplify this task, we have already marked there for you what we consider to be the easiest way to calculate them. It doesn't mean that you must go down that line. You may take the other options. You will see a bit more of information about these different options in the next slides, but I will, through the other slides, all the time address you to what we consider and has proven to be the less error-prone of the options within this tree to calculate the personnel cost. So don't be scared. It might look difficult, but it's because you are looking at every single possible way that you may have to calculate personnel costs. And at the basis, it's extremely simple. The logic that you can easily follow is that the personnel costs in Horizon 2020 are calculated simply by multiply the number of hours that the person worked in the project, in the Horizon 2020 action. And for these unit time records, I'm going to insist several times on this, by an hourly rate, so X euros per hour. And you don't need to invent a formula for the hourly rate. It also comes within the grant agreement. So when you sign the grant agreement, in the text of the grant agreement, the explanations about how to calculate this hourly rate are already there, clearly detailed. And beyond that, you also have the detailed explanations, developments, and examples about this calculation in the annotated model grant agreement. I will keep on repeating this annotated model grant agreement several times. I will give you the link at the end in case that you don't know it. So hours worked in the project multiplied by an hourly rate. Keep this in your mind because we are going to now explain in a bit more of detail these two elements. The first, hours worked in the project. Horizon 2020, you need timesheets. You need timesheets, you need timesheets. Keep this in mind. We will keep it repeating. It slightly changes in Horizon Europe, but as you have already understand by now, Horizon Europe is going to be a different story. We'll have separate presentations, we'll have different grant agreements, so it does not concern today our presentation. Horizon 2020, you need time records. There is one exception for persons working exclusively in the action. You can read about that in the annotated grant agreement. By default, keep in mind timesheets. And you don't need to record all the hours. You just need to record the hours that the person works in the Horizon 2020 action. So it's not that we are imposing you something beyond what is necessary to calculate the personnel cost. And there, in your timesheets, you cannot declare budgeted time. So it's irrelevant if at the beginning you estimated that the person will work 3 months in the project and eventually you needed 6. You cannot declare the budgeted time. You must declare the reality of the time worked in the action. Similarly, you cannot declare estimated time. So it's not about at the end of the year, well, I think that the person worked 500 hours in the project and I declare these 500 hours. It does not work like that. You cannot declare estimated time. And you cannot declare either, and this happens in some specific contracts, a percentage of the time of the person. So it's not enough to say, well, So once again, and for the last time now, remember that you need, in Horizon 2020, timesheets for the hours declared to the grant. So the other side of the formula is the hourly rate. Now that we know how many hours the person has worked in the action, we need to determine the hourly rate. And it is the grant agreement who tells us, well, you will calculate the hourly rate by simply dividing the personal cost of the person by the number of productive hours. What you can put in the personal cost you're looking there on the slide is the real salary of the person, the social security contribution, taxes, and other costs that are included in the remuneration of the person that arise from national law or the employment contract. Okay? Be very careful about things like gifts or bonuses that are given not based on objective conditions, premiums, that might be delicate and in many cases might not be eligible. So keep in mind that these are the elements that you can put within the calculation of the hourly rate in the personal cost. Then we need to divide this personal cost by the number of productive hours. And you remember the tree with all the options? Well, there are 3 options for the number of productive hours. The first option, the one that we recommend, the simplest, the less risky, is 1720, so 1,720 hours per year. It doesn't matter in reality if the person actually works more hours in total than the 1720 or less hours than the 1720 in total. You can always use 1720. If the person works part-time, you will do a pro rata corresponding to the part-time. If the person is employed just for 6 months, it's going to be just half of this 1720, so also a pro rata of this 1720. But any beneficiary, any one of you can use the 1720 hours to calculate the hourly rate of the person to charge the cost to the Horizon 2020 grant agreements. It might be possible that you don't like it, for instance, because you already have your own methods to calculate annual productive hours. You're a big company or a big institution, and you have cost accounts, and you yourself said, well, yeah, I'm already doing this my way, and want to keep this system. For that is the standard. You see this option that is in your left bottom corner of the slide. And you also can calculate it person per person, taking into account the number of hours that the individual person worked during the year. We put these 2 options there, are also open. They are subject to conditions. If you don't like or you prefer not to use the 1720, please check carefully how and under what conditions you can use one of the other 2 options. Then, the next question is, now I know that I have to multiply the number of hours by an hourly rate. And how many times do I have to do this? How many times do I have to calculate an hourly rate? Well, the main, again, branches in our tree, the main option and the one that is the simplest, and because it is the simplest and the less risky we recommend, is do it once in each financial year. So just once at the end of each financial year, you calculate your hourly rate by dividing the annual personal cost by the annual productive hours. That's very simple. Normally, you have already these global amounts because of your statutory accounts or because of the tax declaration, so it's very easy. Now, if you want, there is a small downside on this main approach, that is that when at the end of the reporting period, the financial year is still ongoing. For instance, your financial year ends in December and the reporting period ends in March, the year after. You will have to use for these last months, these months of the ongoing financial year, the hourly rate of the previous full financial year, your last closed financial year. So you will not be able to calculate hourly rates for fraction of a year, which implies that if there is a salary increase at that moment, well, it's not going to be reflected immediately in the hourly rate. It's going to be for the next reporting period when you will see this hourly rate updated, if you want. Well, there are cases in which beneficiaries told us, well, look, this is not my normal way. I want another option, or I'm not happy with this because, okay, the ongoing financial year in your example is 3 months, but it might be 11 months. And if there is a significant increase in the salary, well, we will be able to recuperate more EU funding if we will have different approaches. For instance, this second option that we have allowed now in the Horizon 2020 grant agreements, that is to calculate the hourly rate per month. So rather than doing for each person an hourly rate at the end of the year, you will do 12 hourly rates, one in each month, by dividing the monthly personal cost by the monthly productive hours. If you go down the line, if you would say, well, I indeed prefer, I don't care, it doesn't matter for me all this additional administrative work because of the monthly calculations, I insist 12 rather than one in a year, I want to go down the line. Again, please check carefully in the annotated model grant agreement the explanations for this monthly hourly rate, because there are some specific conditions that make the calculations in some cases slightly more difficult than the financial, the calculation based on the full financial year, so more prone to errors. The option is there. We recommend you going to the annual because it's simpler, it's simpler, and it implies less administrative burden. But if you want to check the other, if you want to see how it works, the information is available in the annotated model grant agreement. Now, there are two ceilings that apply to your personal cost declarations. In reality, the two ceilings are based on the principle that the grant agreement, the grant itself, can never result in a profit for you. So we are covering costs, right? So if you are making a profit, we are going beyond what has been your actual cost. That would not be possible. To ensure that we respect this general rule of not making any profit out of the grant, there are a double ceiling on your personal cost declaration. The first side of the ceiling is that you can never declare in a year, in total, in all EU grants together, more hours than the number of hours that you have used to calculate the hourly rate, so the number of the annual productive hours. So if I took option 1, 1720, and I calculated my hourly rate based on the 1720 hours, I can never declare in EU grants in a year, in total, for that person, more than 1720. Even if in reality, for whatever reason, the person working more hours. It is irrelevant, because when you divide by 1720 and multiply by 1720 again, it implies that you have already charged the full personal cost of this person in that year to EU grants. That's the reason why, even if the person works more hours, you have to stop declaring them to EU grants. And immediately related to this, we also have the second condition that says that the total of the personal costs declared for reimbursement as actual costs in EU and Eurotown grants in a year cannot be higher than the total personal cost for this person in your accounts. So it's the same logic. You cannot make a profit, you can never declare more than the total of the personal cost of the person. After that, you may say, well, still it looks rather complex, and there is a lot of math to make these calculations, and there are the ceilings and the options, and I'm a bit afraid or scared of making mistakes and having to pay back later on. That's dangerous. Well, what we have done to help you in that situation, or for instance, it also happens that you are just a one-time participation in Horizon 2020, and you are worried that you might be missing some elements. We have prepared a wizard, so an IT tool to support the calculations that verifies automatically this double ceiling and helps you through your choices. You have there the entry point to this wizard tool, which is available at the time of your reporting, so the financial reports, okay? You see there this magic one, which will give you the access to the wizard, which is not mandatory. You may use it, you may not use it, it's your choice. Eh? It's available for you. We have done it to help you with the calculations and all the conditions, but if you prefer to do it yourself on your way, on your own, not on your way, the way is the one in the grant agreement, that's fine. But if you want, the possibility is there. Now, to wrap up my part of the presentation today, we are going to tackle a few special cases with a couple of key messages. So let's imagine that you are in a situation. Here we have two persons. One is representing our side, one is representing your side. And you say, well, look, I want to pay more to my employees than the normal salary when they work in this prestigious grant. Our reply will be, well, if the only moment in which, and the only occasion in which you do that is when participating in Horizon 2020 or even in European Union grants, we cannot accept it because we want to contribute to your cause in the normal way that you do it. So paying the normal remuneration, participating to your normal policies, travels, etc. So if it is just for us, it's not possible. Okay, we will just cover up to the normal basic salary. It can be, however, that you reply, but the thing is that I always do this when it is a prestigious grant. So my internal rules go into saying that when there is an important prestigious grant, we will pay more to the person. Well then, and this is the message, it might be possible. We call this project-based remuneration, but there are specific rules that you need to apply. And if there is something that we unfortunately have to recognize that is somehow complex about Horizon 2020, is this project-based remuneration. So don't be surprised, don't be scared, but if you are in this situation, here really I must insist that you check very carefully what are the explanations in the annotated model grant agreement, and remember that you can always contact us. I'll tell you how in a couple of slides in case of doubts. Two other specific cases. Remember that I explained to you that it was possible to declare as personal cost the cost of the SME owner, so the owner of an SME who is the beneficiary, the SME the beneficiary in the grant agreement. If this owner is not an employee, in some countries it's not possible to be an employee of your own company. So if this owner is not employee but participates in the grant agreement, so works directly in the grant agreement, in the action, in the project itself, we accept that the time of this SME owner is valorized and can be charged to the Horizon 2020 action via what we call a unit cost, which actually is an hourly rate that is fixed by the Commission and that will appear directly in your grant agreement. The difference, I insist, is if it is an employee, it follows the same logic that all the other employees. If it is an SME that is an SME owner that is not an employee, then you have this unit cost, even if the person is paid by any other means, including service contracts or whatever non-employment contracts. In those situations, it's always the SME owner unit cost that applies. And finally, the last special case that I wanted to name here is the case of consultants. Remember that, as said in the second slide, that in many cases, or in some cases, you can also charge as your personal cost people who works in the project but are not your employees. They are working to you via other type of contracts, a service contract typically, or any other type of labor contract, but not employment one. Well, this is possible, but it's not always, and it's not systematic. It's not because you hire a consultant on personal basis that you can declare the cost of the person as your personal cost. So here, please check the Article 6282 and the explanations in the annotated model grant agreement, because even if very often they can still be declared as personal costs, there are some cases and some circumstances under which you will have to declare them as subcontractors, worst scenario, or purchase of services. So if you have this type of consultants, be careful, check it carefully, do it right from the beginning. Don't wait for an auditor to correct you and recover the money. So this is going to be my last slide, and it is about where you can find more information about everything that I have explained and many more issues that today we didn't have the time to get into details. First message, you have heard me speaking several times about this Horizon 2020 annotated grant agreement. This is really the book where everything is explained. Whenever we have questions, we use exactly this information to reply to your questions. So same document for you, same document for us. It's full of examples, detailed explanations, and it also contains the articles, so the parts of the grant agreement to which the explanations refer. It is available through the portal, and you have a direct link here in the slide. more in detail, if you want to go into details about the practical implementation, the procedures, etc. So beyond the legal provisions of the grant agreement, you have the Horizon 2020 online manual, also available through the portal and here with the link that is in the slide. And it might be perfectly possible that after reading, it's still not clear one element or another aspect and you want more information. It also happens to me. In that case, you can first of all contact your national contact points. These are people who is specifically dedicated in your country to reply to questions about Horizon 2020. They know your language, they speak your language, they know your particularities, and they are particularly knowledgeable about certain aspects of Horizon 2020. Your national contact points, the details, the contact details are available also in the portal. So through this link also, and at the end, you have also the possibility to contact us directly, the Commission directly, via the Research Inquiry Service, where you can submit your question, your specific question is going to get arriving to me, my colleagues, sorry, depending of the area to which the question refers, and you will get a written answer by email directly from the Commission. And this is it. I stop here with this part of the presentation. I will pass the floor now to my colleague Soren, who will speak about the audit dimension of Horizon 2020, and we will have plenty of time at the end to reply to your questions. Thank you very much. See you later.
I hope you can hear me. I will quickly present to you the audit perspective, let's say, for Horizon 2020 grants. What we see in practice and so on. But first of all, we'll go to some introduction and speak about the errors. What do they occur? Why do they occur? Of course, misunderstanding of the rules. That's the part where David kindly presented to you the bigger tickets. And then, of course, lack of attention to the detail of the provisions of the grant agreements. And there, I really recommend you to go through the annotated grant agreement, read carefully, and really pay attention to the details or to the specificities you are looking for, because there are many guidelines included. And of course, intentionality as well, that can explain why some errors can occur. The consequences of error are, of course, negative ones for beneficiaries. This can be the non-optimal use of funding available, and this may lead as well to recoveries, of course. Not only for beneficiaries, for the European Commission services as well, the scrutiny that the European Court of Auditors can scrutinize the budgetary authority in charge of the Horizon 2020 actions. There could be an increased error rate as well, of course, an increased ex post audit efforts to detect such errors, and eventual corrective measures that may be applied. So this in a nutshell to speak about the consequences of errors and why we would like to avoid them, of course. Now, quickly, just to give you an idea about how the error rate is calculated, basically, from the audits that we are performing, from the population of paid Horizon 2020 grants, we are taking a sample and we calculate an error rate based on a simple calculation. Basically, we are summing up the negative adjustments from the audit, and we are dividing this by the sum of the audited amounts. The assurance elements of the audit, the main purpose of an audit is to provide assurance. Now, the assurance elements are used to assess the legality and regularity of Horizon 2020 project payments, and to also calculate a so-called residual error rate. Basically, the residual error rate is the, let's say, remaining error not detected within the audit. And the point that the objective is to keep this residual error rate as at an acceptable level. The general control objective of the control strategy is to get the residual error rate as close as possible to 2%, without necessarily expecting it to get under 2%, of course. The main detected errors, so now we're trying to, we'll present to you in the slides the main detected errors during the audits that we carried out for Horizon 2020 actions. Are for personal cost especially, they are due to mainly first of all, incorrect productive hours calculation. Basically, I think we have a slide later on about this, but this is referring basically to the three options to calculate productive hours and to the correct application, especially of the second option and third one, meaning the individual productive hours or the standard productive hours, which have some conditions to respect. So therefore, either the conditions are not entirely respected or the errors refer especially to these conditions to be respected. The option one, obviously, it could be used, so we have less errors there. Regarding remuneration cost, we may have incorrect remuneration cost, like, for example, estimated cost or budgeted cost, which may indeed explain some of the errors in personnel cost. The other part is incorrect time working on the action claimed. Obviously, this is linked directly with the timesheets. And of course, all the elements explained by David, my colleague David, earlier about the timesheets should obviously be taken into account, because this may lead to errors if this is not the case. And of course, unreliable or missing timesheets, this may lead to rejection of cost or to calculation of adjustments by the auditors. Just to make sure that the personal cost is correct, so how to tackle these errors? For the personal cost calculation, the method to calculate personal cost is to multiply the hours worked coming from the timesheets with the total of personal cost, basically basic salary, social security contributions, and add-ons, to the total productive hours obtained by using the options explained earlier, 1, 2, and 3, basically fixed number of hours, individual productive hours, or standard productive hours. This second part of the equation is called the hourly rate, and basically for the personal cost, or for the upper part, we would advise to make sure that the time recording system, this is for the, first of all, for the number of hours, some advices from an audit perspective. So we will advise you to make sure that the time recording system is consistent with the human resources records, probably dated and signed, not in excess of your full-time employment. And this has to do, of course, with double sealing, with respect to double sealing, explained earlier by my colleague. And of course, to have sufficient, to have the time recording sufficient in terms of information. And here you have, of course, the necessary information in the annotated grant agreement with the minimum conditions that could be included in the timesheets. For the numerator part now, for the personal cost that you can include to calculate the hourly rate, the eligible personal cost may include, as I was saying earlier as well, the brute salaries, the gross salaries, the social security contributions, the employers and employees contributions. So obviously the employees contribution is included in the gross salary. I will not enter into these details, but both of them are eligible. And taxes and other costs included in the remuneration if they arise from national law or employment contract. So these are the eligibility rules. Now, what they should not include is any ineligible item. There is a specific article, namely 6.5, which details all these ineligible items, majority of them. And any cost included in other budget cost category, obviously like indirect cost or subcontracting or travel cost, etc., should not be included again in personnel costs. So I think this is very obvious. For the denominator, so for the down part of the equation to calculate the hourly rate, the advice, as my colleague said as well, is to really use the option 1,720 hours. This has the less, let's say, the less possibility to make errors. Yeah, it's one fixed amount, you can use it, and the possibility to make errors is lower. Now, if you can use this option, if the employment contract does not specify the working time, or conditions, or if the annual workable hours cannot be determined also. So you may have some specificities here. If you have those specificities, you may use also this option in addition. For individual annual productive hours, so this is this option 2 to calculate productive hours. Basically, the formula should be used, the formula which is well explained in the annotated grant agreement. So to calculate this annual individual productive hours by first calculating the annual workable hours and deducting, of course, absences and adding also overtime. For the standard annual productive hours, this should be, so here we have conditions obviously for option 2 and 3. We don't have all the conditions on the slide, but basically, please, if there are specificities to pay attention to are those conditions where we can use this. For example, individual and productive hours cannot be used in certain conditions and in certain circumstances and so on. For standard annual productive hours, this should be, that's one of the conditions, according to the beneficiary's usual cost accounting practices. And of course, the minimum threshold of 90% should be respected, meaning the annual productive hours are at least 90% of the standard annual workable hours. Basically, by taking out the absences and overtime, this will not be more than 10%. Now, some further advices on how to avoid errors. You can make sure that the time charged to the project is correct. Basically, all the hours that you use to calculate the personnel cost are exactly the same as what you have in your timesheets or in the time recording system, if it's an IT one. You may be amazed, we still find many differences in the time charged in audits. Time records, the second advice is that time records that you use meet the grant agreement's conditions. Basically, you have the name of the person working, the signature of the person, signature of the supervisor, etc. The number of hours, obviously, very important, worked on the project. And in the remuneration, the numerator is correct. As explained earlier, you do not include ineligible items. You only include those elements that come from the labor agreement, etc., labor contract. And then for the down part of the calculation, productive hours in the denominator are correct, meaning either you use simply option 1 and then there is nothing else to check further, or if you use option 2 or 3, you will make sure that the conditions to use these options are fulfilled. Furthermore, personnel cost formula reconciles, meaning there are no arithmetical errors still in the formulas. This may happen, this still happens, although with using IT tools, this is less and less the case, but we may still find errors there. And that transaction listing reconciles. Here, given the fact that often beneficiaries are taking extracts, what we call breakdown of cost, extracts of cost from the accounting system or project accounting system to declare this in the financial statements for Horizon 2020, there could be, let's say, some rows that are not taken properly or errors still that may happen there. Employment contracts are in place for employees, obviously. For the other type of personnel, we're not talking here because we are more focusing on personnel costs, but basically for employment contracts, if you are declaring personnel cost as for employees, you should make sure that the employment contracts are in place, of course. Also for the audit, and this you will receive anyway a list of documents to prepare for the audit in advance. And one last part, basically here exchange rate, to ensure that the exchange rate is stipulated by the Horizon 2020 grant agreement is calculated, because you have to use a specific exchange rate. Of course, before you press the button, you do all these final checks. Now, this is only several hints and advices from an auditor's point of view. Of course, there are many more details that we see but this is to only give you an idea about what are the main elements you can do in order to avoid errors. Some additional info, some of them have already been indicated by my colleague in the previous presentation, but basically we have the Horizon 2020 Indicative Audit Program, where you can go and see what are the main checks, indicative checks that could be done in case of an audit. So there you can also test for your own situations or specific situations, or for the checks that you could do already at your level. Of course, Horizon 2020 online manual, we have a section, specific section for audit and certifications. Inside, of course, the online manual itself. And the same as in the previous presentation, national contact points or research inquiry service for any other further questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, and we are now back to the live session. Thank you very much for bearing with us also during this little technical hiccup with the sound. I hope it was repaired quickly, and in any case, the recording, the correct recording of the session will be put on YouTube afterwards. So if you missed a few seconds, you can still go back and look at this. Many thanks also for the interesting questions. For the moment, we count 64 questions on Slido. We encourage you to go on in case you have further questions, or also to upvote questions of others if they are of interest to you. And now we go immediately into the questions and answer sessions with the first one, the highest on the list. What happens if the monthly rate has gone up since you submitted the proposal? David, do you want to?
Yes, I take it. Hi, good morning. I'm David Mefuto from the Common Legal Support Service. As there are a lot of questions, we are going to try to go straight to the point so we can deal with as many as possible. So this first one, what happens if the monthly rate or the hourly rate or whatever gone up since the proposal? I'm afraid I have no news for that. You know, the budget is a fixed envelope, so we cannot go further than that. You will report the reality of your new calculation for the hourly rates, but you will not be able to increase the total budget of the grant. So yes, you report the reality, even if it's higher than what you would budget at the beginning, but the limit of the grant amount will not be increased.
Okay, thank you. Next one, who needs to sign the timesheets apart from the person working on the task? Maybe for Sorin?
Yeah, I can take it. So the list of signatures is explained in the Untitled Grant Agreement in Article 18, and it's the supervisor that needs to also sign in addition to the person working on the action. The supervisor of the person working on the action.
Okay. Next question, are paid holidays included in the total yearly costs of the employee?
Okay, the short answer is yes. Whatever is the statutory parts of the remunerations, like if you have a holiday pay, a Christmas pay, a 13th salary, it's statutory and it's an entitlement of the employee, is to be included in the calculation of the hourly rates.
Okay, we look for the next one, which is probably not on Horizon 2020, but on Horizon Europe. When will the new Horizon Europe version of the annotated grant agreement be published? That's for you, David.
Yes, there is a lot of explanations already now published. The draft AGA version is available now since some months ago, with most of the parts that refer to the calculation of the financial aspects of the grant agreement, so notably, for instance, the personal cost. Of course, there's going to be a new version with more information for the articles that are not yet included in the current version, and it's going to be published as soon as possible. There is no fixed date. Our colleagues are working intensively on that. But for today's information, most of the provisions, financial provisions, cost-related, are already published in the current version of the AGA, Horizon Europe.
Okay, next one. Can an annual hourly rate be calculated if the personnel did not work and the entire previous year? For instance, it was hired, the person was hired only in July. I think we speak here about the pro rata, but David, you...
Yes, absolutely. That's not a problem. You will take the annual personnel cost, so if the person was hired in July, from July to December, and you will divide by the corresponding pro rata of the annual productive hours. So there's no problem. Even in December, you could do this calculation. You don't need to have the person working the whole year in the previous year to calculate the hourly rate. You just take the total personnel cost of that person from the start of the contract and divide by the corresponding pro rata of the annual productive hours. It's not a problem.
Okay, next one. Someone working at 100% for a project still needs to fill in timesheets. I thought a declaration stating that would suffice. Yes, indeed.
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
So yeah, indeed, if the beneficiaries have the choice to either declare to use the declaration of exclusive work, if the person's under certain conditions, of course, if the person work exclusively for the action for an unlimited period, or if the person in question do not use this declaration of exclusive work because there is no exclusive work, or for other reasons, the beneficiaries should use the time recording systems of the timesheets. So the understanding is correct indeed.
Okay. Next one, I'm interested in Horizon Europe cost declarations as well. Yes, very understandable. I replied this one myself. So we are preparing a first so-called coordinators day on grant management in Horizon Europe. That will come very soon, namely next week. If you go to our funding and tenders portal, to the section on events, you will already find the announcement, and it will be a similar setup as here in this meeting today, meaning it will be broadcast on YouTube and you will be able to ask questions via Slido. And within this Coordinators Day, we will have a section explaining all the details of the costs, including the personnel costs. So please come and join. Even if it's called Coordinators Day, it's open for everybody to participate. Next question, can we access the wizard for personnel cost calculation when not at reporting time? This is very necessary, I think. I am afraid the reply, as it is implemented today at least, is no. It is linked to our workflows in the electronic workflow tools for the reporting. So at the moment, that is not possible, but we take note and we will look at the technical possibilities to make this possible.
Particularly for Horizon Europe, I don't think we can change that at this stage of Horizon 2020, but we're already working in the preparation of the wizard for Horizon Europe, and we will reassess if this is possible for the future with Horizon Europe.
Okay, next question, can we choose the calculation with annual hourly rates for permanent staff and monthly hourly rate for contractual staff, or do we have to use the same calculation?
No, for that you have to use the same calculation. What you can have is a different method for the annual productive hours. Depending on the group of staff, you could use 1720, for instance, for permanent staff, as an example, and use individual annual productive hours for your contractual staff. That's possible. But regarding annual or monthly, you must take one of the two options for all your staff during a whole financial year. You can change in the next financial year, but it's still keeping annual or monthly for all your staff.
Okay, again, a question on the pro rata. How to calculate exactly a pro rata of the 720 hours? Can you give an example? Sorin, can you give an example? Yes.
What we can see in practice is that, the easiest example would be the person started working 1st of July. Obviously, the person worked 6 months, so the productive hours for its 6 months will be the half, 860. Now, what becomes a little bit more complex is whether when the person starts working on 5th of November. So there, what we can see as good practice is that, for example, you would really take 1 month and another 25 days or 26, 25, And with this, you multiplied with the number of days, or you divided. You calculate, let's say, the equivalent in days of the 1720 hours, and you can have a rule. So the number of hours to be used as productive hours would be the number of days worked during the year. So basically 25 days in November plus the days of December divided by the total number of days in a year. Could be a good practice.
Thank you. Next question. We have interns hired, dedicated to projects, and thus PM, I assume, means person months, are rising while staff costs decrease. Does it matter?
It might matter. It's not necessarily that it's a problem in itself directly, but it might matter. If during grant preparation and in your annex one, you explain that it's going to be a number of person months per specific work package, and then eventually you declare, let's imagine, double of person months, you will most likely be asked why this difference. In many cases, you will simply explain, okay, this has happened because it took more time, or because eventually it was less time that was needed and we reallocated part of the efforts. But it might matter if, for instance, you committed to have a Nobel Prize working in the specific project in this work package, and at the end you just have a stagiaire, so trainees doing the work. That might be an element to be considered by the granting authority to say, well, we give you this grant because you were supposed to have this Nobel Prize working on it. It's an element that to be evaluated. So in general, it's not a problem. You will be asked why this difference. You will explain the reasons, and normally there is no big issue around it. But in specific cases, it might, as I explained, it might have some consequences. In the very extreme cases, you don't need to be worried. You just need to explain the reality of the things and why this difference has happened.
Okay, next question. We have a final review meeting in the H2020 project that occurs after the final reporting period. Is it okay to include hours and costs for the final review meeting? We have a...
Yeah, we have a sort of exception for that, because costs related to the final report are acceptable even if incurred after the end of the action. That covers also costs that could be for this review meeting. Now, this is very limited. So overall, we are speaking normally about minutes for the participation or the preparation of the final reports. So it's not big deal. It's no big deal on it. And I don't even know at one point we verify that during an audit. But in any case, not to commit storing, it's possible. But of course, normally these are really minor amounts. Okay.
Do you want to add up to this?
Maybe just to say that indeed, if you do declare such cost, okay, as David said, one of the eligibility criteria for the cost is that these costs are incurred during the period of the project. So obviously, these costs are not incurred during the period of the project. We will check, let's say, as auditors, whether this specific situation foreseen for cost incurred outside the period of the project are indeed fulfilled. So the conditions foreseen in the annotated grant agreement, the model grant agreement and annotated grant agreements.
And if you want, we have a specific explanation in page 39 of the annotated model grant agreement Horizon 2020 for this cost of final reports and participation in the review, even if after the end of the project.
Okay, next question. Is a travel allowance per diem to cover meals costs during a specific trip for the project a travel cost, or is it part of the personnel cost for the person? I think that is easy to reply.
Travel cost?
Travel cost.
Travel cost.
Travel cost.
Usually travel cost.
Next one. While calculating staff costs, some colleagues may have a special and punctual activity bonus. Do we have to include this bonus in the declaration? I'm afraid now it becomes a bit more tricky.
Yes, there is no answer to the question as it is, because bonus is one of the most complex things that we have regarding the eligibility of personnel costs. If the bonus is statutory, if it's an unconditional entitlement for the person, then we will say yes, no problem. You put it into the declaration. I speak, for instance, if I I don't know, if I work in dangerous conditions and because of that I have the right to an extra payment, that's fine. It's in the collective labor agreement or it's in my contract, so it's my entitlement, it cannot be denied, it's part of my personal cost, that's not a problem. It's much more tricky when we come into bonus that are not statutory and that might depend on, well, for instance, this activity bonus. The rule of thumb would be, well, if there are objective conditions supporting this bonus, so I know when I will get how much and because of doing what, you may include it in the personal cost. Now, be careful if the bonus is triggered by a specific project, then we will be, for the participation in a specific project, then we will be in the context of project-based remuneration, and that's another whole separate webinar that we will need to explain that. So let's keep to the rule of thumb. Be very prudent. It must be either statutory or be clearly based on objective conditions in order for you to be able to take into account the calculation of the personal cost. I would strongly recommend you to read carefully the part of the annotated model grant agreement that deals with bonuses, because there are quite a number of specific conditions that might bend the eligibility or ineligibility of the bonus depending on their characteristics.
Okay, we go to the next question. Social and security contributions to be included in the personnel costs, shall they be only the one paid by the beneficiary or also the one in charge of the employee?
So the cost that should be included, the social security cost that would be included would be all of it. So the employee's part, which is included in the so-called gross salary or brut salary, and the employer, so the beneficiary's part as well. Basically, what we do consider for the total cost of one person is the brut salary, so including the employee's social security, and the employer social security, so the one that is paid by the beneficiary itself.
Okay. Next one, how to use annual hourly rates if the person was only hired recently and did not work the previous year?
Okay, for that we have a specific case in the annotated model grant agreement. If you control persons hired during the financial year, as the person was not there in the previous year, the only way in which you can calculate the annual hourly rate is taking into account the time, the cost and the time that the person worked in the ongoing financial year. Let's imagine that the reporting period ends in June and the person was hired in March, and then you will take these 4 months of employment of the person to calculate the annual hourly rate. So the personal cost of the person from the moment in which the person was employed in the current financial year until the end of the reporting period, and then you will divide it by the corresponding pro rata of the annual productive hours. It's an exception and insists. It's not the general rule. If the person was working the previous year, you will have to use the hourly rate of the last closed financial year. But if the person was not there in the previous year, you have no other option than to calculate the annual hourly rate with the data of the ongoing financial year. And I insist there is a specific exception case in the annotated model grant agreement where you will find the same explanations basically that I have given you now.
Okay, the next question is again about more or less hourly rates. In case of change of position and then new salary of a staff member during the year, is this new rate eligible and adjustable?
I wouldn't say it's a matter of being adjustable. It's that you will calculate a single hourly rate for the full financial year. So if the person changed position and had a salary increase in June, you will not automatically have a new hourly rate. You simply will calculate the hourly rate of the year of 2022, for example, taking into account, well, both contracts, both remunerations, putting everything together. So the total personal cost of the person in the year with the 2 contracts, or the 2 positions, or the 2 different salaries, are divided by the annual productive hours. If you think that this is something that is implies a damage for you, you can always calculate monthly hourly rates, and then the change will be automatically reflected, but you must do that for all your staff. So you cannot just take one single person and say, because of this person changed position, this person I will calculate monthly hourly rates. So from the month in which the position is changed, the new hourly rate will apply. You can do, you are able to do that, you are entitled to do that, but if you do it for all your staff during the whole financial year. So generally speaking, you will simply take both positions, both salaries, and calculate a single annual hourly rate for the person. Fine for you? Sorry.
Just a small precision, maybe in cases, but these are very rare, but in cases where the type of contract will be very different and the methodology calculation for this other type of contract or other type of personnel is different, then you have to be careful to eventually really calculate most probably hourly rates on this different type of contracts. I'm thinking of interim or which are not eligible, but about trainees or other type of contracts for which you may have a different type of calculation. So there, I think it's more prudent to have a different hourly rate calculation.
Yeah, that may happen, for instance, if there was a non-employment contract and is converted into employment contract. That might be one of the specific cases. But as Sorin said, that is really quite exceptional.
Next question. We have 3 owners in the company. We have limited work contracts. Whoops. Now I have to, here we are. We are going to declare 30% as personnel costs and 70% as...
Now it's completely gone.
Now I can't see the question anymore, but I think it was rather clear what was meant. Can you, or didn't you get it yet?
It's there. We are going to declare...
We are going to declare 30% as personnel costs and 70% as the owner's work without salary. Is this okay?
It's not okay. I don't see exactly how you will intend to do it, but it's not okay. If the owners do not have an employment contract, so for us in the context of the SME owners, a salary comes from an employment contract. So it doesn't matter if they have the type of contract, so whatever way to remunerate other than an employment contract. Either the owners have employment contracts, and then you calculate their hourly rate as for any other employee, because beyond being owners, they are employees of the company, then it's fine. Or you will have to use the unit cost for the SME owners. There's no in the middle option, and there is no third way to do it. Either employment contract, and you calculate hourly rates as for any other employees, or the SME owner unit cost. And certainly I don't see even the way in which it could be a combination.
Yeah, my understanding here is that in that case they have employment contracts, because they say limited work contract, but only for 30% of their time. And for the rest of their time, they are the owners working on their own. So
maybe just to clarify also that the cost that you have to declare, they should be actual cost. So if you declare the actual cost of of the owners, then if the owners have a work contract for part of their time, which could be possible under for example, French law or other. So indeed, you will have to calculate an hourly rate for this time. But if they will declare hours from the other 70%, then you will need to use the Marie Slotowska-Curie hourly rates, which are foreseen in the grant agreement. But also, I would raise the attention of those that are looking that this is really one of the type of findings that we see with owners that are not declared under Marie Curie, or owners' costs that are not declared under their employment contract. So if you really have doubts, maybe it's easier to send the question to
yes, thank you very much. Sorry, because actually at the level of the CLSS, we have never been consulted in a case in which there is this possible combination. So if actually the situation is as Sonia explained, in which there is, or Peter also, that there is an employment contract part-time and that you somehow intend to work full-time for the grant agreement, please send the question to the Research Inquiry Service. You have seen the link in the presentations with the details of what is the specific situation, and then we will analyze and reply to you directly.
Okay, the next one. is, I think, the one starting with consultants. Consultants working as personnel work under similar conditions as employees. So do we have to pay sick leave? These days are these days eligible for funding?
No, it's working under similar conditions and remunerated similarly, but it doesn't mean that the social benefits, if you want, have to be the same. When we speak about working under similar conditions, we speak about presence requirements, hierarchical subordination, if you want. That must be not the same, but similar way to organize the work. It's not about similar in the sense of social advantages, etc. So you don't have. I presume that you don't have to pay sick days under your work contract, which is not an employment contract, and so if you don't have to pay them, they are not eligible either.
Okay. Next question, very easy to reply. Are we going to receive the presentations? Yes, they will be, or they are already maybe on the event website. So if you haven't reached this event via the event website, you go to the funding and tenders portal, you go to the section on events, you open the part all events, you will find the event of today, you click on it and you will arrive on an event page for this event today, and there we will put all the documentation and links and also the slides. Okay, next one. What are the conditions for tuition fees, studentship fees to be eligible?
Well, here again we have a specific explanations in the annotated model grant agreement that you can consult for the details, because not all students can be charged to the grant agreement. For instance, the agreement with the student must be work-oriented in order to be able to charge their costs. Just to give you an example, so useful to review in the annotated model grant agreement explanations. And again, as a very basic rule of thumb, it must be part of the remuneration of the student. So the waiver of the fee, which is typically the case, that's okay, because of this agreement you don't have to pay the fee, must be considered or registered, if you want, as part of the remuneration of the student, and whatever agreement links the student with the organization. There are other smaller details in the explanations, but I think that this is the most important element that you need to bear in mind.
Okay, next, I think we can combine the next two questions about electronic signatures for timesheets. So can we use electronic signature, and do we need a specific tool for recording the timesheets?
You want to take it, sorry?
Maybe you take the electronic and then
okay.
You can take the next one, please.
Well, the electronic, yes, but it needs to be, well, to make it very simple. You might have an electronic signature, that's fine. It can even be in the way of a username and password to click that is accepted or confirm that it's signed. My only remark there is that not everything that is in the computer becomes an electronic signature. We have seen often the case in which an Excel file is say, well, we have electronic timesheets, and it's simply an Excel file in which somebody is typing there the number of hours without no verification, no way to verify it or to confirm that somebody has actually, that the person has actually encoded her or his own hours, and that there has been a verification. So not everything that is in the computer is an electronic timesheet, and not everything that is in the computer is an electronic signature. But yes, a real electronic signature, or at least something based on a username and password in which you have a record of the different steps and persons who intervene in the recording, that would be fine. Again, we have specific explanations in the annotated model grant agreement. I insist with the annotated model grant agreement because it's really the document that we use systematically to reply to your questions, to advise the auditors also to verify during audits. So it's a long document, but it's a very useful reading, at least in the parts in which you may have doubts.
For the specific tool, to record timesheet, we see in practice it's up to each beneficiary. If you don't use timesheet in general and you will need a timesheet only for this project, maybe the easiest way is to take the model that is given in the annotated grant agreement and use it through Excel and then sign it in paper and so on. We see, of course, other tools as well, and it's really depends on how much you really use timesheets or if you have a full time recording system. So the easiest way most probably is to take the model and use it in Excel and sign it in paper.
But maybe to complete, if your organization has an electronic time registration system that fulfills our minimum conditions for the electronic signature, which are explained in the annotated grant agreement, you should of course use this one and not invent another system just for us or go back to paper just for us.
Indeed, and maybe to add also in addition, what you should have in mind is that it's a document, okay, that you will sign, but that the auditors will also double check or cross check during an audit, a potential audit. And one of the elements to ensure the validity of these timesheets will be that the auditors will cross check this data with, for example, the elements in the holidays of the same person. So if they find inconsistencies, they will start asking questions. So please be careful when filling it in, that you should also ensure that this indeed makes sense and it's in line with the other elements, travel also, holidays and other elements of what we call reliability of the time recording system.
Okay, next question. Can you explain how the adjustments work? Can we or should we make positive and negative corrections in two previous reports, I assume, in the same actions?
Yeah, if necessary. If you realize after doing a declaration, after submitting your financial reports, that there has been a mistake in the calculations, or you forgot to declare X cost here or there, you made in the next reporting period submit an adjustment to cost previously reported. That's a normal procedure. The only element that I would like to underline here is that you cannot recalculate personnel costs because of an update in the annual hourly rate. Remember that when we speak about a reporting period ending in June, for instance, well, you will need to use the hourly rate of the last closed financial year, okay, ending in June 2022. What you cannot do is in the next reporting period saying, well, now I have the information for the whole 2022, for the whole year 2022. So what I already reported at the end of the first reporting period until June, I will readjust with the new hourly rate. That's not possible because the rule is when at the end of the reporting period, the financial year is still ongoing, you use the last closed financial year. So there has not been no mistake there. That's the rule, how to declare it. So this is a case in which you cannot do adjustments because you actually reported the cost in accordance with the grant agreement. Differently is if you made a mistake in the calculation of the last closed financial year hourly rate, and then you realize later, but I forgot to put this cost element, or actually the hours were not correct, then you will do an adjustment, declare an adjustment to make the correction to what you declared wrong in the past reporting period. That's perfectly fine, and it's not just fine, it's that you must do it, either for positive or for negative adjustments.
You should do it.
You should do it.
That's one of the reasons also of this webinar is if you detect that you made some miscalculations, also, please correct your financial statements. Yeah.
And actually, it's like the audit says, it's not just negative. If there is also a positive adjustments, you realize that you forgot costs. And the auditors also occasionally do positive adjustments when they go there and they realize that some costs are miscalculated and actually the beneficiary is entitled to a higher amount. This also happens and this appears in the audit reports. It's maybe not so often, but it happens certainly.
Okay, next question. What is the way to use I would guess it means a seconded person during the project? Does it have to be reported to someone, and in what way? Should an amendment be filed regarding this?
Well, to make it short, Gabriel, a seconded person is an in-kind contribution. In this case, the in-kind contribution is the work of the seconded person. So you need to fulfill the requirements for in-kind contributions, notably that it must be the in-kind contribution and the third party giving the in-kind contribution should be indicated in Annex 1 of the grant agreement. If they are not there, if they are not in Annex 1, the best is to do an amendment, indeed. There is the possibility of the simplified approval method, which is via reporting during the periodical reports, but it's not advisable because then the granting authority may decide, well, I didn't know that you were intending to use seconded staff. It's not a problem, normally seconded staff, but okay. I didn't know, so I might decide to reject the cost. So the best is, if you have seconded persons and you didn't put in the grant agreement in Annex 1 that there was a third party providing you this in-kind contribution, so the seconded person, go for an amendment. And one element, just one additional element, remember that the eligible costs are unlimited up to the costs incurred by the third party, so the real cost for the third party, what costed the seconded staff for the third party. Sorry?
Thank you, David. Maybe just to mention also that a word of prudence, please have in mind also the fact that you can make an amendment during the period of the grant, and that once the grant is closed, and which may be the case for many Horizon 2020, you may, I mean, up to you, but the amendments will not be possible anymore. So please, check it beforehand and make the amendment as soon as possible, if this is the case.
Next one, is there a template for the timesheet document? The reply is yes. David, can you tell us exactly again where to find it? And maybe we will even put it also on the event website if it's not already there.
There is a hyperlink in the annotated model grant agreement in the explanations of Article 18, if I remember correctly. And then you have a hyperlink to the suggested. It's not a mandatory template in the sense that if you have already your own time recording system and your own timesheets, because it's your usual management practice to have timesheets, and if they comply with the minimum requirements, which are really minimum, okay, you don't need to change, you use your timesheets. But for those beneficiaries who normally do not fill in timesheets, we have created this model that is available in the hyperlink under Article 18 in the annotated model grant agreement.
Okay, next one, are costs for interns eligible?
Well, that's very generic. Normally it may be eligible, yes, why not? But it must fulfill all the eligibility conditions. It's not because interns automatically become eligible or ineligible. You need to have the calculations of the personal costs as they are defined. You need to be, the cost must be necessary for the action, etc., etc. So generically, my reply would be, yes, they may be eligible, but you need to verify all the cost eligibility conditions to decide in each specific case if they are eligible or not.
Maybe to mention also that this is there is this clarification, the annotated grant agreement of this specific case for PhDs, and anyway the work contract, so the agreement with the intern or the work contract should be work oriented, right, and not training, not
Absolutely.
to provide training. So not to forget that it's a research project. So the objective is not to train necessarily the intern, but to rather work for the objectives of the project.
Okay, next question. Can meal voucher management costs and social secretariat social management costs be included in the calculation of the personnel costs?
Well, typically it's going to be indirect costs. Typically, it's going to be covered by the flat rate for indirect costs. There might be exceptional cases, but in what we have there, intuitively, it's indirect costs. Do you agree, Sorin?
Yes. So for the Secretariat Social, for sure, that's usually the accounting cost or the cost to do the general general administration of the company. For the meal voucher management cost, I would say to be seen, because there could be indeed this.
The issue is that they refer to the management cost, not the meal voucher, because in many cases meal vouchers are actually part of the remuneration. But here, now I realize that we speak about the management cost of that. So we cannot be absolutely conclusive just in one sentence, in one question, but it looks rather clearly that it's covered by the indirect costs.
Okay. Next question, will you also provide written answers to the questions here? No, we will not. But as we said at the beginning, all this is recorded and it will be available. The whole video, including the presentations and this questions and answer session, will be available on YouTube for later watching, so you can go back if you have forgotten a reply to a question. Next one, what figure amount applies to the SME owner's unit costs?
I was looking for it because I had it noted, but I cannot find it. It's 30-something euros per hour adjusted per country correction coefficient.
And it depends on the work program, Marie Curie.
See, and there is a slight difference depending on the work program Marie Curie. So the calculation, well, actually the calculation is automatically done by the system if you are an SME owner. But if you want to do it on your own, also in the annotated model grant agreement, there's the hyperlink to the decision where the figures appear. But it was 30-something and adjusted by the country correction coefficients.
Could be also put as a link, as a useful.
Yeah, I think we can also put this as a special link in the event website afterwards.
And by the way, this is not open to debate. There are many cases, and this is not my intention to dispute that okay, the 30-something euros, even adjusted, are not so much, and normally I charge much more. But remember that here we are not, the EU granting authority is not paying for a service. That's a different context. What we are giving is a help to carry on the project, to do the action, something that you will get the benefits at the end. The EU granting authority gets nothing out of it, apart of the satisfaction to help you doing the grant, during the project. So it's not an issue open to debate if normally I should get more or less. The decision has been done like that. For the future, there might be other decisions with different amounts, but today is that amount, and it cannot be, it's not open to negotiation. That's what the message that I wanted to convey to you.
Okay, next question. Can we add the paid sick leave personnel costs to the calculation if an employee is 100% dedicated to an H2020 project?
So it's not a direct yes, but I would say that we should be prudent. If a person works 100% for the project, you will have to claim, so calculate an hourly rate, to claim in the numerator, the upper part, all the cost of that person. So if the person was sick and he received some remuneration, you'll have to declare all the cost of that person. I would say to be prudent in the sense that if you do receive reimbursement from the national security or for the person, you will need to eventually to declare the net, the difference between what you paid and what you received as well. So please pay attention on this side. And in the calculation of the hourly rate, in the denominator part, you have to also deduct the hours that have not been worked, during because of the sick leave in the calculation of the productive hours. David, you want to complement?
Yeah. The only thing that I was thinking is if you use the declaration of exclusive dedication, there is a specific condition in which if the person is absent for more than half of the month, generically speaking, you cannot take into account that month. So you might be interested in, if you have the situation, to use timesheets rather than the declaration. It might look complex to understand, but it works like that. So in a case like that, okay, if the person is out for a few days, 5, 6, 7 days, it doesn't make a big difference. But if the person is sick for a couple of months, you might have an interest to have timesheets rather than the declaration.
And also depending on the options of productive hours used, if you use option 1, this can also be a little bit more complex. So to deduct indeed the sick leave. So because it's fixed amount, you can only deduct the paternity. So if you have a specific situation, maybe the easiest is to send the question to Research Inquiry Service for a clarification of the specific case.
Okay, I think as a next question, I take the one on the Christmas bonuses, because cumulated with the two, they are higher ranked. So you skipped the question on the Christmas bonuses. These are paid to all employees. Are these eligible personnel costs?
I don't think we skipped the question. Look, there is a big difference. I'm the boss. I'm a happy year. And I decide that this year everybody gets 5,000 euros extra. Not eligible, because it's not objective. It's because it was I was pleased that day, and I feel rich and I feel generous, and as I am the boss, I decided to pay everybody 5,000 euros more. That's not an objective bonus. Now, if in the statutory accounts there is, in the statutory part of the statutory remuneration of the person, is explicitly stated in the collective labor agreement, for instance, that at the end of the year everybody will get the 5,000 euros, then fine, it's an entitlement of the person. I cannot avoid, as the boss, paying that amount, and then you put it into the calculation of the personal cost. So it's not just because it's the Christmas bonus that is eligible or not eligible, it's why the person gets that amount. It's because the person has the right, so it's an entitlement, then it's fine as any other remuneration entitlement. You put it in the personal cost, or it's a Christmas gift because I feel like Santa and then I decide to pay this extra amount. And then we will say, sorry, it's a happy event, we don't doubt it, but for us it's not eligible because it's not necessary in itself. Well, I hope now it's the replied.
Okay. Then we have a question that was upvoted in the last few seconds. When will it again be possible to participate for these type of events in Brussels? We have started to have, again, on-site events in Brussels. We might think about having in the future some types also of these very practical events, but the big advantage of remote or maybe hybrid events is that we can reach many more people. So we had editions of this error rate webinar with 1,000 participants and more, which we could never afford to invite to Brussels. So in the most likelihood, these meetings will stay remote or at least hybrid, so that the ones who really feel the urge to come to Brussels can come here, and we have a smaller meeting room here, but we will broadcast it in all cases to anybody else who wants to participate. Next question. If you calculate the hourly rate monthly, what about one-off payments like the 13th and 14th month? Spread them or only include them in the months when paid?
Spread them.
Yeah.
That's it's not an option. You must spread all that is paid once per year. For instance, if you are in the month once per year, if you are in the monthly calculations, you cannot put it just in the month in which it's paid. You must spread it over, which makes the monthly calculations more complex. That's why it's something that we do not necessarily encourage. It's much more administrative work than compared with the annual hourly rates, and it's certainly more risky because of elements like this, the need to spread the annual payments over the months.
Okay, next one. Can we add the paid sick leave personnel costs to the calculation if an employee is 100% dedicated to a H2020 project?
That already.
Yeah, oh sorry, we had this already.
Yeah.
So then we take the next one. Is it possible to do the declaration on a daily basis and not in hours? French engineers have work contracts based on days and not hours.
So good news for Horizon Europe is going to be based on days, but Horizon 2020 still remains based on hours. So you need to convert those days into hours. By the way, in Horizon Europe, it happens the other way around. Many entities have time records based on hours that they will need to convert into days. So there's no way in which we can make everybody happy. For the time being, you need to, for Horizon 2020, you need to work with hours.
Okay, next one. If an SME has 3 co-founders, owners, how should they be declared in the A4 form? The budget template does not allow to add more than 720 hours. That is a very technical question.
The 1720 is per person, it's not globally. That's why, did you see the...
So maybe the A4 refers to Article 62A4 and the cost category A4, which is in the financial statement. The budget template, maybe this refers to the wizard, which does not allow. Anyway, so I think maybe this has to do, but in case we do not reply to your question, do not hesitate to send it to the Research Inquiry Service. But if you refer to the fact that for one person, you can declare maximum 1,720 hours for an SME owner, applying the Marie Sklodowska-Curie unit cost. This is absolutely normal because according to the double ceiling, we can have maximum 1,000, so maximum the number of productive hours that could be claimed for one person. I hope this helps clarifying. If not, please send the question through the research inquiry service in
Yes,
case we
because
misunderstood
it's not evident. The 1720 is per owner. So if incidentally one of the owners working more than 1720, the ceiling is 1720. There's no way in which for the same person you can charge more than the 1720 in a single year, but it's not cumulative.
So in any case, we will go back and check into our, maybe it's an IT-related issue, we will check. But I would also invite you to send this question, as the colleague said, to the Research Inquiry Service, so that we don't forget to reply directly to you. And as you are anonymous, we cannot do this just now. Okay, next one. If in case we budgeted high personnel costs, is it possible to transfer this budget to other categories like subcontracting or travel or equipment?
Okay, there is a lot of flexibility in the budget. So there is a lot of possibilities to rearrange the budget between beneficiaries and between cost categories. If you want to move into subcontracting, then systematically the best is that you ask for an amendment, because for subcontracting, the task to be subcontracted must be indicated in Annex 1. So if you are adding new tasks into subcontracts, you need to have them into Annex 1. There is also the light approval procedure based on the periodic reports, but certainly it's not advisable. So if you have the situation, you want to move costs into subcontracting for subcontract new elements, for instance, ask for an amendment. Travel or equipment, you don't need an amendment to move budget. You can do it in a flexible manner, but you need to be always in mind that whenever you are moving tasks, you need an amendment. So, for instance, if you budgeted a lot of personal costs and eventually you realize that instead of this money in personal costs, you need a piece of equipment, surely it's because probably it's because you are doing something different than what you were expected to do in accordance with your Annex 1. And that you need to communicate to the granting authority, and that you need to reflect into an amendment of the Annex 1. So for subcontracting and changing the tasks, systematically an amendment. For the rest, you have flexibility, globally speaking, to shift budget around. In case of doubts, contact the project officer. It costs you nothing, and you will have a confirmation that you need or you don't need an amendment.
Yeah, maybe to come back to the warning that Sorin already mentioned on a similar question. If so to say, the decrease in the personnel costs is related to that you have promised very highly qualified people implementing the project, and then you go back to PhD students, that might put into question the evaluation of your proposal, because the quality and qualification of the people doing the work is part of the evaluation of your proposal. So be careful also on that part. Next question, timesheets. If we justify our time only indicating the work programs and tasks, is that enough for audit? Should we provide more information?
Yeah, I think you're looking for the 6 minimum conditions, no?
No, actually, I was looking for the next question.
Very good. So, as a best practice, we will. I would recommend you to go and see, and you will have the link to the timesheet, to the template of the timesheet also in the event, in the page event, in the page of the event. But also we have the so-called 6 minimum conditions of the timesheets in Article 18 of the grant agreement and in its annotations. And basically, you need to have all these 6 elements indicated in your timesheet. So basically the name of the beneficiary, the name of the work package as well, eventually task, the number of hours worked on the action. So let's not forget the most important part. Also, the name of the person working on the action and its signature, the name of the supervisor and its signature. And I'm not sure I listed all of them, but please go and see all the 6 and put all of them in order to have a compliant timesheet for an eventual audit.
Indeed, we cannot repeat it often enough. Just look at this template, which gives the minimum. You can have more in your time recording system, but this minimum you must have. And I think it is very clear, and it's also not exaggerated. the amount of data and information that you have to put in for each person for the time recording.
Just to mention maybe also that this is important because in case that you don't have all this information, then an auditor might put into question the reliability of the time recording system or of the timesheets that you use. For example, if you don't have the number of hours, then it's difficult to quantify and to check that indeed the number of hours claimed for the project are indeed those that are substantiated by the timesheet. So that's one example. Then other examples can be the counter signature of the supervisor or of the person working on the action. So as soon as you don't have these minimum elements, then the auditors will probably have to quantify differently to the extent possible and based on the alternative evidence you would provide, the time spent on the action, which is a very painful exercise. So really to be prudent, please check all the necessary elements and include them in the timesheets from the very beginning.
Yeah, when Sorin says a painful exercise, means that there will be some cost rejected.
Yes.
So be careful with that.
Yes, so we start the other way around, rejecting 100% and then adding up the hours that we may validate because there was a travel, because there were other elements that could really be taken as an evidence substantiated instead of the timesheet. So yeah, just to really stress the importance of this element. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking what would be the next one that we have not yet replied. Does the staff working on a Horizon project full-time or part-time have to have in their work contract that they are working on the project 100% or 50% or 25%?
No. No, that's precisely one of the elements that make the timesheet so crucial, that we don't even care that much what is said in principle if it's not contradictory in the contract, because what we want to know is what's the reality, and the reality appears in the timesheets. So that's why for us it's such a key element on the reporting and on the later audit. So it's not about the contract of the person saying whatever, it's about what it's reported and can be verified as actually worked based on the timesheets.
Okay, I have to look to the person in the control room. The next two questions we have already replied. So is there any more question upvoted, or are we at the end of our list? Apparently we are at the end of our list.
I think that the next one is a bit an adaptation of a previous one now, because here is the final review after the 60 days, which is the time supposed to submit the final report.
Yeah, you're right.
And there, that's what I was looking. Look, the explanations said that cost of participating in a final review carried out by the commission, agency, or granting authority before the submission of the final reports are eligible. So the 60 days do not mark the end of the eligibility. If you have not submitted yet the final reports and the project officer is aware and there is an extension of the period for submission of the reports, and this review is taking place even after the 60 days, the cost can still be eligible. So it's not because happens after the 60 days that is completely over, but it must happen before the submission of the final reports.
Okay, next two questions are about consultants. Does a consultant have to work regularly on a weekly basis, full-time or part-time, to be assimilated to personal costs?
Okay, yes. The things to compare with what your staff does, what your employees do. So for instance, if people, let's take the example of teleworking, if people systematically telework from home and they just have to go to the office or the premises of the beneficiary once per week, well, the consultant does the same thing, it's going to be fine because it's working under conditions similar, for instance, in these presence requirements. We always put the example on the other way around. Let's imagine that, now it's not so usual, but let's imagine that your employees have to be in the office every day 9 to 5, and then you have a consultant who is not supposed to appear ever in the office. Well, we will most likely say, well, this person is not working under conditions similar. This person really looks like a subcontractor or something like that. It's not like an employee, you see? So it's not a matter of having to work on a weekly basis. Each time is, well, if you take this consultant and you compare what your employees normally do, is quite the same or is totally different. And if it's quite the same, we'll let it go as personal cost. If it is clearly something that happens completely different to what your employees do, well, then most likely we will reclassify this cost under one of the other categories.
Okay, I think you partially already replied to the second question, so I think we can close that one. Next one, the contract refers to staff conditions which says employees have extra pension, health insurance, child allowance, and so on. Are these costs eligible in the cost calculation?
Well, I would say generically yes.
Yes,
But
it's an employment contract.
Voila. I would think, sorry,
So,
yes, indeed.
Yeah, to be careful, if it's an employment contract, yes. I mean, extra pension provided that this is, I assume, for all the persons, or at least stipulated and mandatory in the legal requirements to this extra pension. I don't know what this could be, but eventually you may health insurance, child allowance. These are usually eligible costs. For the extra pension, I think we don't have more details, but depending on what it is, if it's extra pension that anybody can have and they just have to pay an addition, and then okay, I think it should be okay. But yeah.
Okay, next question on exchange rates. So for countries having their national currency on the situation, the monthly or a rate calculation, in which period for the currency rate should be used?
The conversion rate is at the end of the reporting period, so it's the same that for the annual hourly rates. You may have more than one annual hourly rate, but you just convert into euros the total cost at the end of the reporting period.
And if I remember well, we also have a link in the annotated grant agreement to this web resource giving the exchange rates for all the countries of the world. So you just go there and you find on the day of reporting what the rate is for your particular situation.
So maybe if it's not, just to clarify, so all the cost in the national currency, you will use the exchange rate published on the ECB portal and declare the amount in euro using that rate, which is at the date of the end of the reporting period.
Yeah. Next one, if the timesheet is in an Excel file but the signatures are digital, for example, Adobe Read or similar, is that okay? I can reply this one myself. It depends. So this signature must fulfill the minimum conditions. So if you speak about the so-called qualified electronic signature, meaning you have an ID card with a chip and in your country this system is adapted, and so from the qualified signature in that PDF document we can trace back to you as a person and also find when you did it, and this PDF, the signed PDF is not changeable without destroying the electronic signature, then yes. If it's just somebody without possibility to tracing back to the person, pressing a button and then there is a stamp appearing on a PDF, that is of course not okay. So it depends. It depends on what you mean when you say digital signature. And again, the minimum conditions are in the annotated grant agreement. Okay. Next one, do consulting costs have to be declared as personnel costs or subcontracting?
Well, that's a bit what we were trying to explain with this Article 6.2a.2, the natural persons with a direct contract, that if these consultants fulfill the conditions of this Article 6.2a.2, notably that the working conditions are similar to those of an employee, then it would go under personnel costs, and if not, it will go most likely under subcontracting. So it depends on this assessment, person by person. Is the person fulfilling the conditions of Article 6.2a.2 or not? And then if not, we'll go into subcontracting. So there is no unique reply because it depends on each specific situation.
Okay, next one. What kind of documentation is required when you have seconded personnel? Can the person still be employed at their company and they invoice the salary?
Well, just one element, and then let you, because I didn't say that before. When it's a seconded person, we strongly recommend to have a secondment agreement on top of the rest. Of course, if the person is seconded, it's because the person keeps her or his contract with her or his original employer. So it's not that it's switching and now we hire the person directly, because then it's not any longer seconded. So in addition to the contract, potentially the invoice for you to make the payment, if it is against payment, you should have also a secondment agreement. Sorry?
Yeah, just what we see during an audit, for example, when we have a seconded person, is that obviously there would be an invoice from the other entity to the audited entity, secondment agreement as well, clarifying the references under which the agreement, the secondment is done. And then we can, of course, we will have to check as well that the cost declared is at the level of the cost, and there is no profit included as well. And in addition to that, we will have to check as well that this has been foreseen in the Annex 1 of the grant agreement. So in case that the entity which sends the seconded person appears in the grant agreement. If this is not the case, then yeah, we have, so this refers to the previous question about the amendment, to do an amendment while the grant agreement is still, it's not yet closed.
Okay, next one. All our employees and consultants can all work 100% from home. For consultants, does it matter if their home is outside the EU?
If it doesn't matter for the employees, normally it doesn't matter either for the consultants. Fine for you, sorry.
I think so.
Because it's the condition similar. So if you really can have also employees. Now, my worry there is not really just on the consultants, it's on how do you control the time that your employees work for the action, and that would apply to the employees and to the consultants. So I'm sure that you have a very nice method. Be ready to explain to Sorin when he will go in an audit what is your method to control how many hours the persons actually worked in the action if you never see them at your premises. It might be perfectly because it's an IT development company and you keep traceability of the number of hours that the person is connected. I don't know. But that's an element that will play a role not just for the consultants, but also for your employees when assessing the eligibility of their personal costs.
Okay, next one. I have a question that might sound silly, but regarding the overall working time, should we also exclude lunch time or we round it up?
I assume the lunch time is not part of the paid time, at least in the work contracts that, I mean, it depends on each member state, but in general, what we see, at least what I saw personally in audit, is that, yes, the lunch time is taken out from the productive time. Now, if
it's taken out from the productive time, the person is not working in the action. So there's no, now there are, over the years we have seen funny stories like people saying, well, I charge the time that I'm under the shower because it's when I think the best on the project. The researchers are rather particular sometimes. So that's unverifiable. The person is not supposed to be working under the shower, for instance, or after the working time. You can only declare the time that the person actually worked on the action. So lunchtime, the person is not working in the action, you cannot declare it.
Okay, next one. Can we distribute more than 8 hours daily in the timesheets?
Distribute? Well, I presume that you mean charging more than 8 hours because the normal working day is 8 hours. There's no problem with that. If you actually work it, remember what we say, yeah? You declare the reality. So if the person actually worked 9 hours that day or 10 hours, and if this is legally possible in your country, you will declare in the timesheets 9 hours, 10 hours. We have the limitation of the double ceiling. At the end of the year, you cannot go declare in your actions more than the number of hours used to calculate the hourly rates, for example, 1720, but you can perfectly work in one day more than the standard 8 hours for whatever reason. So that is possible. If it is also legally possible to do that overtime work in accordance with your national labor law.
And you should also not forget, if you do work overtime and you do register it in the timesheets and you do also claim it in the financial statement for the Horizon 2020 action, then you should also take it into account in the calculation of productive hours as overtime, depending also on the option you choose. So could be, please look at all the aspects.
So I'm looking at the time. We reached the end of the meeting. I would suggest we take still 2 more questions and then we wrap up.
Okay.
So next one, back to the consultants. How is it evaluated if consultants have the same working conditions as employees? I think you gave some indications. Maybe you can give some more.
Practical example, perhaps, sorry, just not to repeat myself.
Some practical examples. So I would say the other way around. You can very easily see when you have employees, because you will have an employment contract. Okay, so that's very, very obvious. You have direct subordination, etc. Now, this assimilation to employees of these consultants is maybe in practice due to some particular legal can I call them possibilities in certain countries or in certain member states, which makes it that they are assimilated to personnel, to employees, these contracts that happen with these consultants. So in practice, what we see is that, what we see is that if these persons work almost like any other personnel, then maybe the best thing to do is to take the conditions from the grant agreement, check them one by one if you fulfill them or not, and if you have any doubt, maybe the easiest is to really write to Research Inquiry Service, explain your particular situation, even send some examples of a contract or the article, the details, and then you will be guided on how to. But I will be prudent because, it's not. The alternative is that this cost could be considered ineligible because they are not foreseen in Annex 1 and so on. So the alternative, it goes very quickly into rejection of the cost.
It's not something that happens every day, because the experience over the years is that it's relatively rare that there are rejection and even reclassification of cost of consultancy. Really cases in which obviously there is no comparison with what an employee normally does. My example of, somebody who is working from the US, the employees are here all the time, and the person is developing a part of the action from the US or, I don't know, from Japan, and you can see that there is no way in which you can say that it's working like an employee, because there is a lot of autonomy and independent developing work, not supervised, as you see. So this is not to say don't worry at all. It's just to say don't worry more than needed. Once you have checked the conditions and you see, normally I can argue that it is comparable to an employee, there's no too big reasons to be concerned about it.
Okay, we turn to the last question for today. What about teleworking allowances? So a relatively new subject.
If it's an allowance which is given to, which is not arbitrary, which is given objective and given to all the employees equally, then I don't see any reason not to have it be considered as eligible. Most probably it's part of the remuneration package, and so.
Well, typically for me, you made the very good point at the end, saying, first it must be considered part of the remuneration of the person, because otherwise we might be in the context of indirect costs. Let's take the example of the car, of the company car. If I have the company car at my disposal and it appears in my payslip partially or totally as part of my remuneration, that's rather evident. By many cases, I can use the company car, but it's not my car, it's just to use during working hours, and then it would be an indirect cost. It could be a bit similar here. If this teleworking allowance appear as part of my remuneration in the payslip or for tax purposes at the end of the year, and is objectively given and is an entitlement, even it has been decided by the company for everyone, then okay, you put it into the into the personal costs. In other cases, it would be covered by the indirect costs.
Okay, so we have to stop here. We reached the end of the webinar. Many thanks again for the very interesting questions. Many thanks to the colleagues for helping to reply. As I said, all the material, all the background information and the links are already or will be available on the event website. And with this, I think we close. Thank you very much again and have a nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.